sacrifice to the gods. He and his wife were given immortality and lived at the end of the earth. And this is a nation that's not quite as near, but it is near enough that you'd expect them to have some kind of interaction. Lithuania is next to Russia and Sweden. And this is how they told their story. It says, from his heavenly window, the supreme god, Pramzimus, saw nothing but war and injustice among mankind. He sent two giants, Wandu and Wirias, water and wind, to destroy the earth. And after 20 days and nights, little was left. Pramziras looked to see the progress, and he happened to be eating nuts at the time. And he threw down the shells. One happened to land on the peak of the tallest mountain, where some people and animals had sought refuge. Everybody climbed in and survived the flood, floating in nutshells. God's wrath abated. He ordered the wind and water to abate, and the people dispersed, except for one old elderly couple who stayed where they landed. To comfort them, God sent the rainbow and advised them to jump over the bones of the earth 9 times. And they did so, and sprang up 9 other couples, from which 9 Lithuanian tribes descended. So that even relatively close to Israel, they had some pretty wild differences in their stories. But if you go to East Africa, they have a lot of very close similarities. It says the people were sinful and not mindful of God. God resolved to destroy mankind. He told them to build the ark. They took animals of every sort. And God caused a great long rain which caused a flood. And all their men and beasts drowned. And then Tumbe Not let loose a dove. And he saw 4 rainbows, one in each quarter of the sky, signifying God's wrath is over. All right, and this is from the Malay Peninsula. I think it's very interesting because some of the science that we have speculations on could be using some of this history too. It says, the ground we stand on is merely a skin covering, an abyss of water. Long ago, Pirmin, the deity, broke up the skin, flooding and destroying the world. However, Pirmin had created a man and woman and placed them in a completely closed ship of pulai wood. And then it also says, all mankind are descended from that first pair. And you can see other stories besides the flood written in these cultures too. This is from the Alaskan coast, on the South Alaskan coast. It says, people were saved from the universal deluge in a giant ark. The ark struck a rock and split in 2. The Tlingits were one half of the ark, and the other people were in the other half. This explains why there is a diversity of language. I'm sure you all wondered where the diversity of languages came from. And in California, they said he blew on them and gave them life. Speaking of first people. And they carried more than just flood stories. This is from Greece, and this is just a setup for the next slide. It says, Kronos learned from Gaia and Uranus that he was destined to become overcome by his own son, just as he had overthrown his father. And as a result, although he sired the gods, he devoured them all as soon as they were born to preempt the prophecy. And Rhea sought Gaia to devise a plan to save them and to eventually get retribution on Cronus for his acts against his father and children. And Rhea secretly gave birth to Zeus in Crete and handed Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, which he promptly swallowed, thinking it was his son. Now, if you go back to the Alaska coast and see, this is very interesting. Yule's wicked uncle had a young wife whom he was very fond and jealous of. He did not want any of his nephews to inherit his widow when he died, as Tlingit law dictated should happen. So he murdered each of Yule's 10 older brothers by drowning them, or, according to some, by stretching them on a board and beheading them. When Yule grew to manhood, his uncle tried to do the same to him, but Yule's mother had conceived him by swallowing a round pebble she had found at low tide, and with another stone she had rendered him invulnerable. When the uncle tried to behead Yule, his knife had no effect. In a rage, the uncle called for a flood, and the flood came and covered all the mountains. I'm sure you guys were all wondering where the flood came from. This is the actual account. Well, maybe not. All right. So I think we've established that paganism was everywhere in early history. And the names of pagan gods were different, though their character traits were often the same. Many of the stories from Genesis and other pagan myths were carried across the globe. So, let's move on to Judaism. What makes Judaism so special? Well, there's a lot of reasons why Judaism is special, but I think I'm only going to give one reason in this speech. And the one reason is because the Jewish record is the most detailed. All right, I'm going to assume that everybody here has read Genesis, and if you haven't, you should when you get home, or tomorrow, because it's pretty late. And I bet most of you have even read commentaries on the smallest details of Genesis. So I'm going to use this book. It's called Jasher. I think it's interesting, so I'm going to use it as a substitute. I definitely think that Genesis is greater than Jasher, but Jasher has some interesting details that I think you'll find are worth hearing. So Jasher recounts the history of Adam to Moses, which is almost the same as Genesis. And the origin of the book of Jasher isn't certain. We don't know exactly where it comes from. We know it was written in Hebrew. But there aren't any ancient manuscripts beyond 1625. And I think the first one was actually printed on a printing press, which doesn't give it a lot of credibility. But it was written in ancient Hebrew, so you can take it or leave it. Jasher means the book of the upright. And Jasher is cited in Joshua 10:13 and 2 Samuel 1:18. And actually 2 Timothy 3:8 refers to Jans and Jambres, who are not mentioned in the Old Testament, but they're in Jasher. They're also in some of the Jewish extra canonical sources, but they're in Jasher too. So Jasher is not as reliable as Bible. I'm convinced of that. They have some pretty funny stories in there, like people at Babel turning into apes and elephants, things like that. Things that I just don't believe. But it's probably more reliable than other pagan mythology. But I invite you to be skeptical of this book. I'm just doing it for interest. So note the details of the Jewish record. So there are names given to people that don't even have stories. These are the names of the children of Canaan. The name of the firstborn is Mahalalel, second Enan, the third Mered, and their sisters were Ada and Zillah. These are the 5 children of Canaan that were born to him. I don't know how that's relevant to any of the stories that we read before or after in Genesis, but all these names seemed important enough to write them down, and I put them in here. And it also says, and these are the generations of Enoch, Methuselah, Elisha, or something, Elimelech, and 3 sons and their sisters were Melchah and Naamah. All these names. You never hear about them afterward. We just put them in there. So there are some details in Jasher that are not in Genesis. So Adam knew his wife Eve, and she bore 2 sons and 3 daughters. And at the time, Cain also began to build a city. And he built a city, and he called the name of the city Enoch, according to the name of his son. For in those days the Lord had given him rest on the earth, and he did not move about and wander as in the beginning. And Arad was born to Enoch, and Arad begat somebody, and somebody begat Methuselah. That actually is in the Bible, a lot of it, but some of it's not. So it's adding in extra details for no reason at all. And even though some of these ages for these people were kind of surreal, they are consistent between Jasher and the text itself. Genesis is consistent in itself too. And it says, and Lamech was 180 years old when he took Ashmua, the daughter of Elisha, the son of Enoch, his uncle, and she conceived. That's pretty old. I'm not that old. And it was in the 84th year of the life of Noah that Enoch, the son of Seth, died. And he was 905 years old at his death. And in the 179th year of the life of Noah, Canaan, the son of Enosh, died. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. That is old. And in the 234th year of the life of Noah, Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, died. And the days of him were 895 years, and he died. And Jared, the son of so-and-so, in those days, the 300 year and the 36th year of the life of Noah, 336. And the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And all the, well, you guys usually skip this stuff, don't you? And after the lapse of many years, in the 480th year of the life of Noah, when all these men who followed the Lord had died away from amongst the sons of men, and only Methuselah was then left. All right, so there are some motives in Jasher that are logically consistent. It says, the Lord granted them a period of 120 years, saying, if they will return, then will God repent of the evil, so that he will not destroy the earth. That's consistent with the way God treated other people. Like Nineveh, he relented. And on that day, the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun was darkened, and the foundations of the world raged. And the whole earth was moved violently. And the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the fountains of the earth were broken up, such as was not known to the inhabitants before. And God did this mighty act in order to terrify the sons of men, that there might be no more evil upon the earth. A couple extra details about the flood. And this is an interesting idea. You wonder about whether something like this would have happened. And the sons of men assembled together, about 700,000 men and women, and they came unto Noah to the ark. And that was during the flood. The flood waters were coming, and they all gathered around the ark. And it turned out that God actually organized, according to Jasher, organized the animals that came to the ark. They all came according to their kind and kind of stood around the ark, and Noah and his sons were leading them in the ark. And they were kind of still standing around when this mob came together, and then they all kind of attacked the people that were trying to break into the boat. And Noah had some interesting words to tell them from the boat. Even if it's not true, it's very interesting, very fun to speculate about. There are a lot of little details about how the ark sat on a raging flood, and Noah, he prayed to God and said, please remember me on this raging flood, because the animals were being tossed about, something like pottage in a cauldron. That's what it said. There's more